So yeah, greetings and GM y'all. We're delighted to have you join us today as we explore the dynamic field of decentralized physical infrastructure networks, or DePINs. These networks have become pivotal in reshaping the landscape of Web3 applications and technology infrastructure. At Textile, the team behind Tableland, we've been utilizing and enhancing the DePIN ecosystem for years through our work with IPFS and Filecoin, a decentralized storage network foundational to the DePIN ecosystem. Over the past year in particular, DePIN projects have unleashed a wave of creativity and ingenuity in crypto, transforming traditional network operations and enhancing systems where seamless value flows and collective intelligence can spur significant growth and opportunity for all the network contributors and participants. Inspired by these developments, Textiles introduced Basin, a protocol designed to support these ecosystems with open, verifiable, and cryptographically secure data exchanges, advancing the capabilities for developers working within these decentralized networks. Today, we are thrilled to dive into the industry's vanguard through the expert insights and experiences of our distinguished guests. Our discussion will be led by Xinxin Fang, a founding member and head of cryptography at IoTeX. Xinxin's experience in developing secure and scalable blockchain infrastructures is tailored to meet the specific demands of DePIN projects, and we are super thankful for his presence today, sharing his expertise with us. We're also honored to introduce our panelists, all pioneers and leaders in this blossoming frontier. Jonathan Victor, co-founder of Ansa, which explores the distributed founder of DIMO, which orchestrates a user-owned IoT platform that transforms vehicle data into valuable resources for technological innovation and rewards. And Manos Nikiforakis, co-founder of WeatherXM, which empowers a community-driven weather network and ecosystem, providing data services and rewarding contributions. We thank you all for taking the time to join us today to explore the groundbreaking possibilities and future shaped by DePINs. With this, let's dive into our discussion. I'll now hand it over to Xinxin to lead us forward.
Yeah, thanks for the great introduction, and thanks for everyone joining today's Twitter space. We have a lot of topics to discuss today. During the past couple of months, we have seen the significant number of increase of the DePIN projects goes into the Web3 space. A lot of them is still in the very early stage. All the DePIN projects I have been talking with them before. They share the common goal. So every project want to achieve the long-term sustainability. However, the DePIN projects, they are facing different type of challenges at this stage, either from the technical funding perspective or from the community growth, as well as the tokenomics design. There's a lot of challenges facing to the entire DePIN community. So I think the primary goal for this Twitter space is to see how we can work together to address those challenges, how we can move the entire DePIN sector forward. So thanks for the great speakers from today's joining today's panel. I think the very first questions I would like to ask for the panelists is that what are the key factors for success of the DePIN projects? How we can build a thriving DePIN ecosystem together, considering the current status of the DePIN space. Let's start from the Rob. DIMO has been building the DePIN application for the automotive sector for quite a long time. What's your opinion on this?
You think about what crypto projects have found some success so far. A lot of them are projects that are either entirely digital or monetary based. DePIN projects, talk about like finding success with DePIN projects. We're dealing with physical networks, and they're kind of underpinned by this idea that there's real demand and use and value in those networks. Whereas maybe for a meme coin or NFT project, the demand is more subjective, mimetic, cultural, something along those lines. So we're building these physical networks. The big question is, do people actually want these physical networks? Are we going to find product market fit with them? And so I think for DePIN projects, it's more starting to prove and show that. Helium, I love Helium as a project. I've been a fan, still am a fan. Love what they're doing with 5G. It was interesting to kind of see them build this IoT network, build it really big on the supply side, but the demand didn't quite materialize, and there was a bit of a contraction with the project. On the Helium IoT front, I think it kind of just shows the importance of getting to product market fit on the network itself. And so at DIMO, we're really trying to do that as quickly as we can to show, even this year, that developers want to build on top of the DIMO protocol, that the data that we're generating for vehicles is valuable and useful, and people want to build great apps and experiences for people who are connecting their car.
Cool. So automotive is a very special domain. There's a lot of challenges need to be addressed. I think another very interesting domain is the environment monitoring. WeatherXM has been the pioneer projects in this direction. Manos, do you want to share your opinion on this question?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's an interesting question that I want to take a step back and work a little bit on the definition of a successful project. Because we might have different opinion here, like what is a successful project. So in my point of view, there's a lot of people who will define success by looking at the price performance of the token, and it shouldn't be that way. I think it should be based on the on the benefits that the project has to some specific group of people, which could be from the community or could be customers and users of the end result on the product that the project is working on. And so from that perspective, I think a successful project should start with that in mind. Answering the question with that definition in mind of success, I think, every project should figure out what a subgroup of users within their community or customer base wants. And this is what we have been trying to do, and it's taking us quite some time. So we've been, as a core team and as a team, we exist for almost 9 years now. So it's quite some time. But we did this crypto pivot in the shape and form that you see today as WeatherXM only 3 years ago. And we had as a priority to create value first and do our tokenomics and token stuff later. So yeah, I hope we're close there as a project. And so that's my advice for any new projects out there considering to do something in the DePIN space.
Yeah, thanks for your insight. Both DIMO and WeatherXM are two outstanding projects focusing on the application in the different industry sectors. There's also a number of projects more focusing on the building the infrastructure components, which can be used by many DePIN projects. I know the Ansa has a deep knowledge in the storage domain. I think John definitely can share his insight on this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's interesting. I would definitely plus one the things that Rob and Manolis were saying, maybe to add a couple other points. I think for successful projects, one thing to think about is sort of how do you build momentum? And I think that's not just on the supply side, that's also on the demand side. So how are you balancing, you're growing an economy overall, not just one half of an economy? So I think those are really important questions for people to consider. Whether that be through their incentive design or how they're sort of putting together their economic structures. Another part to that is composability and making sure that you're building things in a way where you can actually sort of upgrade yourself as needed. So I think flexibility at the right decision points can be really important if you want to support a multitude of use cases. And especially as we see teams trying to reuse hardware in multiple ways. So being able to have protocols sort of cost share on the same hardware, being in a position where your protocol, your hardware is able to support that is actually kind of an important primitive to be thinking about from the outset. And then maybe the last piece to that is thinking about not just composability from the hardware side, but also just interoperability with other ecosystems. I think especially if you're sort of building in a way where your target customer are other protocols, important. And I know the Tableland folks have been really close with everyone on this call as one of the critical players. of like how do you sort of like build the right solutions to sort of connect the pieces in between, so that you can sort of like have this connective tissue. So I think it's like it takes like a pretty holistic view of all of these things, but I think it's like if you were to go look at DePIN over different cycles, I think there's like a view of focusing maybe more on supply side as like the primary thing. Then there was sort of like now I think more of a view of like how do you balance both sides of your economy, but like really lean into like momentum and velocity is like a key piece there. And then also like how do you leave the door open for expansion? So if you want to expand past your sort of like initial vertical, how do you make it possible to do that last bit as well?
Cool. So composability is definitely a very important nature for many Web3 projects, which also implies as a DePIN community, we need to collaborate closely to move the entire sector together. Yeah, another very interesting point, the AI and the DePIN has been discussed a lot recently. Rock, do you want to share your observation on this?
On AI meets DePIN? I guess it depends on whether
Yeah,
you
yeah,
mean like applying. So in our case, like one of the use cases I think is really cool. We give people access. For anyone who doesn't understand what DIMO is, we're a platform to connect any car in the world and make it smart and programmable. We can be the canonical digital identity for a car. We our on-chain NFT of your vehicle points to where the data for your car is being stored off-chain. Eventually, we'll be able to store it on Filecoin and other like decentralized decentralized storage networks. And we allow people to build cool applications for your car using your data. The vehicle owner is the one who's in control of who that data is shared with. So it'd be great to share your car data with an AI agent and to have your car owner's manual shared with an AI agent, so you can just have a normal conversation. You can ask your car questions about itself and say, when do I need to take you in to get serviced again? When's the right time to sell you? What should the tires be inflated to? Is there anything currently wrong with the car? And you can just have like a conversation with your car, and your car can be an expert on itself. That'd be pretty cool. It's like in terms of like an AI use with blockchain. If you're asking more about AI and DePIN, like using decentralized compute networks to power the AI agent itself, or to confirm that something's happening with that you're using a certain model or some. I know there's some cool projects working on stuff like that. I'm admittedly a lot less familiar with those networks, but it seems like a lot of people are including GPU networks like Akash as a part of DePIN, and to that extent, sure, they could be used for AI.
cool. I think many DePIN projects are facing another common challenge is for building the entire application, right? So we already see unlike the traditional like the DePIN or NFT applications, people mainly focus on the writing a set of smart contract, which can enable those applications being built on top of the blockchain. But the DePIN on the other side involve a quite deep tech stack from the in order to extract what has been happening in the physical world and convert into an asset. In the blockchain space, it take long time or long chain to make that happen. Which also means the DePIN projects or implementation is usually more complex when compared to the DeFi or NFT applications. I would like to know from the DePIN leaders here, how do you guys overcome those implementation challenges when you either building your application or either building your infrastructure component? Manos, would you like to share your opinion on this?
Sure. But I want to briefly touch on the topics discussed before as well, because I think
Yes.
that there were some very interesting stuff there. So the composability aspect is really important. I agree with that, and we've looked with DIMO on potential ways that we could leverage weather data that exist that are reported from sensors in the cars, and DIMO is already streaming this data outside in public. Well, I mean, with Yeah. I mean, Rob, you can explain. You can talk more about this, obviously. But the point here that I'm trying to make is that when we looked at this use case, it was very challenging for us as WeatherXM team to separate signal from noise from this weather data. So I'm sure there are very important stuff that we can extract out of those data streams, and we can use them to create nowcast weather services, or to improve weather forecasting, or to create knowledge of weather conditions in general. It's just that it's difficult, and it's difficult from an engineering perspective, from a computation perspective. It's like it requires a lot of things for that to be successful. And the AI movement and the whole Web3 decentralization of infrastructure that we see happening in the last few years is really useful to help us tackle this kind of challenges. So, for example, we could stream this data into some kind of machine learning infrastructure like Bacalhau, which is something that we use. Which is one of the projects that provides decentralized compute power, basically. And so, yeah, we could use Bacalhau to train models and to calculate stuff in real time, and do this cheaply and in a very open source way. And we could use ZK proofs to further anonymize data, because one of the challenges that some DePIN projects have is the privacy preserving aspect of it. We are lucky that we don't have so much in our use cases, because we are dealing with the environment and not with user generated data. But yeah, so I think there is a very good fit there when it comes to AI, if we see it from a computation angle. If we see it from the robots will take over, I don't think they need crypto to do that. They can do it without the Web3 aspect anyway. Yes. And it will probably happen in a centralized environment too. Yeah, touching a little bit on your question about DeFi versus DePIN and the challenges in the DePIN world, I would say that it's more difficult for projects that have this hardware aspect that is generating data. It's more difficult to decentralize because you have this entity that somebody has to manufacture and somebody has to whitelist on your network, and usually that someone is the project itself, at least at the beginning. And that's what we do, that's what DIMO does, that's what Helium did at the beginning. So there is this challenge there, I think, that makes it more difficult for a DePIN project to become a protocol and act like a crypto native protocol. But it seems, there's light in the tunnel. There seems to be ways we can overcome this and decentralize further to the extent that the project can be autonomous and sustainable without a central entity like the company having to, hold the infrastructure in Amazon and whitelist everything. Those are the quick thoughts.
Yeah, maybe to sort of build on that, I think it's one of my observations is like, if you want to build, I think the running joke in like 2018 or so is people talking about like building Uber on the blockchain, and like people who know how distributed infrastructure works, knows like what goes into building these cloud platforms, like instant eye roll, because they know that there's like many things that go into building an Uber like service. And I think like that's sort of like the mid curve in that left curve, mid curve, right curve meme. I think the right curve version of this is like, eventually we can actually decentralize all of these parts of the cloud, but like there's many subsystems that have to be built out. And I think especially for teams that are building sort of like the downstream things, so like building these networks that want to do like fully decentralized like sensor data collection, things like that. I think the challenge is like making sure you're not biting off like the whole elephant. Like it's like pick out like individual slices that are decentralizable and then like slowly move down. And I think this is where it's like also important that there's many different types of projects that are working on different parts of this problem. Where it's like hopefully if like teams like Filecoin and Tableland solve the things on like the storage and like the hot access pieces and the market pieces, it makes it easier to decentralize components that typically might otherwise just be like, okay, well, we have a decentralized supply side in terms of our sensors, but we still need to shovel everything into an Amazon bucket at the end of the day. And so I think that really is just a question of like how hardened and how mature are the like decentralized infrastructure protocols to make it like possible to do that for the teams that are building on top. And then the other thing I think like honestly like DePIN networks is kind of like hard mode compared to a lot of crypto is like most of these systems are being built in a like a trusted like a zone outside of like a blockchain. And so what I mean by that is like DeFi, because it's happening inside of like the block space of some network with consensus, like you sort of, unless you have like oracles that are piping data in, like your trust model is like much easier to reason about. The moment you start saying like permissionless supply side, I think DePIN networks now have to also contend with like, hey, how do I handle like faulty sensor data or like potentially like people trying to like farm rewards and upload garbage or things like that. So I think like the thing that makes DePIN most interesting is it has a lot of challenges to it, but it also has like much more tangible in terms of like what are like net new things that are only possible in crypto, where it's like you have the ability to scale a weather network and collect all of these data assets that otherwise like only be possible through a centralized government. But yeah, go for it, Rob.
I think both those points were really well said. I really like that answer. I was going to reply to the first bit of that about the getting to the point of replacing all of these more centralized things. I like to use the example all the time. I feel like since I got into crypto in 2016, the Web3 Uber is like one of the examples people have given kind of continually over and over again. I know there's a couple companies, Strife and Teleport, that are working on it. But I think that's also a great example to kind of talk about how you decentralize it over time and what the end state looks like and what the in-between states look like. When you think about like what Uber is, it's credentialing the drivers in their vehicles, making sure they have the right licensing and lack criminal records and whatever. So you're doing some KYC on drivers and I guess passengers too to some extent. It's confirming a trip has happened and pricing the trip, kind of putting trips out there to be bid on or accepted by drivers and kind of like the optimal matching traveling salesman problem type of thing. Creating the right incentives, facilitating the actual payments, resolving the disputes, and handling credentials and ratings. And the cool thing with that, I think any company that tries to just like build like a protocol to do all of that, like that's a lot to just take off on your own. And I think even in the case of Teleport and Drive, which I don't know everything about it, I can't imagine they're trying to protocolize every aspect of that all at once. But the cool thing with DIMO, for example, is we're building the ability to confirm a trip has happened and issue credentials to drivers and cars. But other applications are doing, Gitcoin Passport could be doing something on KYC of humans and anti-Sybil stuff. Someone else could build some really sophisticated payment rails thing. Someone else might build a really sophisticated reputation matching system. And kind of like what we saw with DeFi, with money Legos, where you could combine some smart contracts from Compound and Uniswap and repackage it and do something cool and take some Curve, voting escrow Curve token thing over there and kind of Frankenstein it together into some really cool new DeFi thing. You could build Web3 Uber, you could build an automated valet, you could build an online car community for drivers, whatever, where DIMO is just a component of it. And you could also build this over time. So today, to build Web3 Uber using DIMO, there's still a lot of work required. Your team's going to be big. In the future, maybe we can get things to the point where it's like a weekend hackathon project where you just take components from various DePIN networks and DIMO and other places, and you can build Web3 Uber and deploy it quickly and easily to the point where it's also more or less a protocol. So I love that version of the future. I like, I use the Web3 Uber one as an example because it applies to DIMO, but you could find that in almost any type of network and have an equally interesting example.
Also, I think like a really interesting point that you brought up that I think people maybe underweight about DePIN, but is one of the things I'm really excited, and it's like one of my predictions is this idea of like being able to like reuse identity, reuse like I don't know the exact thing we want to call it. It's like reuse like your history from participating in different networks as like an ability to sort of like unlock use cases in other networks. Seems like it's one of the like underhyped trends. I use the example of compute quite often because like compute almost like you can reason about it a little bit easier in terms of like there's certain types of compute trade-offs that you have to make if you're prioritizing like verifiability through ZK snarks or like even just doing compute to like I don't know train an AI model. Like if training an AI model is already expensive and you add in a bunch of snarks, you get expensive squared. And so like really hard to imagine how like if we're already like there people are raising like 9-figure war chests or whatever to like train very large models, adding ZK verifiability is going to be a viable strategy. But like you can sort of reason through like if you could reuse identity from different systems, like could you have GPU networks that are basically like using reputation as collateral, where it's like they've got a work history because they were doing other forms of more verifiable work, and you use that as like an input so that they have something at stake. I think we'll see more of these types of networks. And I hadn't actually even considered that people are looking at that from like ride sharing and even some of these other networks, but it totally makes sense that it would be happening in more and more places.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all this great insight. So actually, I agree with all the panelists here. Since past year, IoTeX has been starting exploring the modularity thesis in the deepin context. One observation, as other panelists already mentioned, right? So people are more familiar with cloud infrastructure. They have been using cloud for building all kinds of applications. But yeah, eventually, the goal from the deepin perspective is we try to decentralize every components, so, right? So we have Tableland building the storage, we have Faircoin also building the like long-term storage. We have the other team building the identity layer, building the off-chain computing components. So how we can coordinate all those components together in a more composable way. So how we can enable the deepin developers or the deepin teams which have the great idea can immediately build their application using those components like they use cloud service today. I think that's a big question. Also, this type of infrastructure, community-owned infrastructure, really need the effort from the entire community, entire infrastructure builders to make that happen. Yeah, which leads to the next question. What are the most effective ways for collaboration among the different teams, deepin teams? Joe, would you like to share your opinion on this?
I mean, yeah, I think like one thing I think is really interesting is honestly it comes down to people like getting together to talk and like know what each other are working on. I think once people have a handle of like what are the rough directions teams are going on, it's also much easier to get a sense of like how do you make sure your roadmaps align with each other and like where are the right places where intersection does make sense. How do you even like build standards and coordinate some of the pieces that maybe like are shared tooling that could lessen the burden for folks who might be going down a similar path. One thing that I think I talked with Andrew from the Tableland team a while ago about was like even thinking about standards for things like data DAOs or even just like how one might tokenize data sets. I think is like really important if you want to start thinking about like monetization, if you want to start thinking about how that could compose with some of the other services that people might build for things like compute and like pipelines and things like that. But it's also equally important to understand like if you're going to design these models, like does that map to like how the data is being generated? And so like from the different sensor networks out in the world or the people who are collecting video data, like is the design of these systems going to be compatible? And then making sure it's like one has a good handle on top of like what are the requirements. So honestly, I think like the most important piece is like actually not just like staying in one's own lane and trying to like venture out to find the aligned parties who are like dreaming of this beautiful future of like all the stuff is
Mhm.
decentralized, and then just make sure that people are building in the same direction, even if they're tackling different parts of the stack.
Cool. Rob, yeah, DIMO has been building the entire system from scratch as a pioneer project in the DePIN space. What's your suggestions for the newcomers, new DePIN startups, in terms of establish more efficient partnership with other DePIN teams?
Yeah, I guess it would be to like, what is the thing that is your core competency that you're trying to be excellent at? In our case, like, we're not trying to be the masters of L1 execution layer, trust, consensus stuff and selling block space. So we're not launching our own blockchain. We chose to build where we did so we could use a lot of off-the-shelf smart contracts and services, infrastructure other people have built, wallet infrastructure other people have built. So yeah, because we're not trying to innovate in wallets either. So what we're trying to do is connect cars, give them identity, give them permissions, and make it possible to build applications in a way that respects the privacy of users, but still enables all the functionality you'd ever need. So those are the things that we're developing and focusing on. And to your question before this too, like, that's where you partner with other projects. Like, we're not trying to build WeatherXM, so we put up a weather stream, and if we can help to validate the sensors on the WeatherXM network, that's a great collaboration. With Helium, our IoT device uses the Helium network, and we're talking to them about how we can do some proof of location mapping for them as well using our device and collaborate there. So there's just a lot of places where the data has applicability across projects, and that's a great place to collaborate.
Cool. Manos, what's your suggestions in terms of collaboration?
Yeah, so interesting questions. And the fun thing is, like, when you ask, like, on the composability, like, how can we overcome the challenges there? My first, because I'm a little bit old school, so I've been in the IT space for more than 20 years now, and my first idea was we need an enterprise service bus for this, and an ESP. But listening to Jonathan, I think his point, actually, his answer is better than an ESP, because I've spent a lot of time in the Filecoin ecosystem, in Protocol Labs. I mean, in general, because Protocol Labs is one of our investors, and I think the benefits, basically, and the ideas and the support and the possibility of growing our project in a composable way, it came from humans and not from interfaces, not from APIs and ESPs. So I think he's right. The teams getting together and working together is probably more important than the technical complexities. And looking back in time, the leaders in the enterprise service bus space, like IBM and Apache and MuleSoft and Azure and Oracle, those kind of companies are not the ones that we want to replicate here. And we don't want to, I mean, I'm guessing in many ways we are not compatible with this approach. So, and it was never an obstacle. The fact that a Web2 startup today doesn't need an ESB to compose and build on other frameworks and other infrastructure. So in the same style, it wasn't difficult for us to collaborate with Tableland and have our weather data archived in Filecoin. It was quite easy, actually. So it's definitely not a technical thing, I think. And then, so yeah, going back to your question and commenting on Rob, I absolutely agree here. Like, there is no point trying to invent the wheel. Web3 is hard as it is already. So everybody should stick to the things that knows better and has more skills, and build on top of the whatever else exists out there already. So obviously, it's, I think in many ways we are spreading too thin as startups with the resources that we have. Anyway, so we might as well focus more on the core service and product that we're building.
Yes, very good suggestions. So I think many DP startups they only have very limited resource, and most startup only can focus on their own or core services they have been building, which means we need the entire community to collaborate, yeah, in terms of the innovation and to explore the new use cases. Those are I think the logic step to move this entire sector forward. While many deepin projects has been building the different components for storage, for computing, for connectivity, etc. How to realize a unified platform which can be used by the entire DePIN community will take more time. When it's become mature and people gain the similar experience when they're using cloud service today, I think more and more DePIN applications will occur. Nowadays, many DePIN projects still running a little bit more centralized infrastructure, but at the early stage, I think it's perfectly fine. But yeah, with maturity of the different components, with the decentralization and the composability, involves, I think the more options will occur and more collaboration opportunities will occur for the deep applications. So I think that the next question is how you envision the future of DePIN based on the application you have been building or the infrastructure components you have been building. Yeah, Rob, would you like to share your opinion on this?
Like the future of the internet, where eventually people stop calling them internet companies or internet businesses and just call them businesses, right? Like eventually, really what we're getting at is that some pieces or all of infrastructure that's part of a network can be deployed in a more nimble and decentralized way. And we'll just see more and more usage of that, which will mean more and more flexibility in these networks, less and less centralization, less and less kind of monopoly and stodgy, slow to innovate, bureaucratic businesses controlling networks, which is good for everybody. More control and alignment with users, and just easier for people to develop interesting things to do on top of those networks.
I think maybe my version of this is like, I spent a lot of time thinking about decentralized cloud stuff from like storage, like CDNs, compute. Like, I think one of the things that gets me extremely excited about this space overall is like, if this stuff works, TM, it's like bigger than what crypto is today by like probably a pretty substantial like factor. Because like crypto itself, like right now, I mean, there's like the store of value stuff, there's like DeFi, there's NFTs, but a lot of that is like things that maybe unless you're like a true believer may or may not like expand out fully. But I think like when we talk about services, it's like we know like it is a validated market that people use cloud infrastructure and like we know that there's like billions of dollars that come in terms of like capital into those like quote unquote economies. And so if crypto rails can actually become the back end for that because we can provide viable services at like the right price point to people, like this is like sort of the big unlock for a lot of crypto. So to me, I think this is where it's like, and then you have composability, like the default is open standards, not like proprietary like black boxes. So I think there's like a lot of really interesting things that come as like downstream effects. But I think that for me is like, what is like the 10-year view, like vision of where things can go?
Yeah, Manos, how do you think the WeatherXM will eventually help the environment changes or help the people? Yeah.
Come on, you're skipping the questions on me all the time, and I have to go back to the previous one.
Okay, sorry.
No, I'm joking. Just quickly to touch on the previous part. There was a point that the buzzword IoT was very popular. If you remember, like 10 years ago or something. And I feel like the word DePIN today is the IoT story again. So at the time we were building. I mean, I'm a computer engineer. I'm a software and hardware developer. So I was working in that space already. And at the time we were like, what is this IoT buzzword? Like, isn't this what we were always doing? Why are we using this word? And how is this different than, connecting sensors or connecting sensors to the cloud, basically? Why do we have to use a special word for it? And over time, the word IoT kind of lost its meaning. And today we take it for granted. Like, you don't expect that most of the modern electronics, you expect them to be connected to the cloud and to exchange some data back and forth. So in a similar way, I think in a few years, DePIN is not going to be something special. It's going to be something that is fading inside of crypto and Web3. And the term Web3 shouldn't be something special either. It should be just the internet. It's just the evolution of the internet. And that's what we're doing here. We're just progressing this technology around networks, basically. And so I hope in a few years, this idea of having Uber on crypto rails is not going to surprise anyone. It will be something completely normal, and it will be normal to have digital identities that can be verified on chain and they're not bullshit. And, and it will be normal to have communities with thousands of people deciding the fate of a project with transparency and democratic votes. So that's where I think we're heading anyway. I think hopefully that should be inevitable, but we're just here to make it happen faster. Now, to your second question, like how we have a positive impact in the world. Well, so it's interesting. We started, obviously, when we started the project, we had many years of experience from the weather analytics industry, and we've done a lot of projects with large enterprises and large customers. So we assumed that the reason why we're doing all this is to deliver B2B services, unique services to those kind of customers that they couldn't have before. But the more we worked into this project, the more we realize that there is a bigger opportunity here, which is to progress humankind, basically, in a way, like Juan Benet is saying. So yeah, I think we have a real chance here to do something with global impact, global positive impact. That's why we steered some of our resources towards doing projects in the global south, trying to understand how funding the commons work, how we can steer funding to create infrastructure, weather infrastructure in developing nations that cannot afford weather infrastructure. So there's going to be a lot of those kind of activities that are going to be announced in the future in our project, because we are actually closing a lot of deals right now in relationship to that. And we hope that we will be a project, a company, or a group of people that manage to create weather data in areas that didn't have weather data before, and that has a huge positive economic impact but also a positive impact in the lives of thousands or millions of people there. And at the same time, it creates sustainability to our project, because we can monetize on this data easier than we can on when it comes to trying to monetize on data that everybody has already anyway, from places that have decent weather infrastructure. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to improve the meteorological industry, and we're starting with the most challenging areas, let's say, and places and parts of the market.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this great insight. I think as a DePIN builder, we are all expecting the DePIN use DePIN as a new way to democratize the physical infrastructure we have been using today, and to have the global impact in the near future. I think we have listened a lot of great insight from the panelists. Next, we are opening the floor to the audience for questions.
Hey everyone, I'm Justin. I'm potentially building a new DePIN project.
I guess maybe to clarify, so are you saying from like people on the demand side, or are you saying more from like the supply side, or just generally people coming in?
Supply side, yeah, like getting new participants into the space. I mean, I imagine there's sort of like a degen profile for someone that's excited to get into it, is sort of like looking for new DePIN projects to participate in. But have you seen projects where it's more the opposite, and people kind of come in through the area of interest and then end up sort of learning about DePIN that way?
Yeah, I mean, I will only give anecdotal evidence, and I'm sure my co-panelists are a little bit closer to this. One thing I've actually noticed is I think people who tend to be like buying physical hardware. So like, I would categorize some of the DePIN stuff maybe like things that you can run at home just with like your laptop. So take like, I don't know, Grass as an example, or maybe like Station or things like that. I think you get, because it has a lower barrier to entry, I think you have a lot more folks who are a little bit more passive. I think what I've noticed for people who have purchased hardware is like you probably get like some split between people who are just like very enthusiastic about like, I don't know, like DePIN overall, but some of them are just like they were looking for a passive thing. Like I know Hivemapper as an example. There's a lot of people who were just looking for like a drive cam, and then their incremental thing was like, I might as well get like the Hivemapper camera just because like it also has this like tokeny thing. So I don't know. Like I think you tend to see less degen-y behavior from the folks who are like investing in physical hardware, just because I think it's a little bit a higher barrier to entry, but maybe there's like a parabola shape to that where it's like if you're really degen, you'll buy like tons and tons of these things. I don't know.
I think you have, up to an extent, when you're designing the project, you can influence that by the balance that you put into benefits, user benefits, and crypto related, like rewards, crypto reward benefits. So, because you can play with your tokenomics, and you can play with the features that your product or service is doing. And so if your goal is to maximize for quality of community, let's say, in many ways, this is what we did as well. You tone down the token stuff, and you try to bring some real value to the end user. So in our case, we started with a weather app that gives you in a relatively friendly way the weather data that your station produces. So we're trying to help people make sense of their environment, of the weather conditions. So we have graphs and a nice UI with weather data, and we have this global explorer where you can see all the stations around you, and it's very responsive. You can zoom in, zoom out, and you can click on things, and it works very nicely on a mobile app as well. And we have, I guess, the most important aspect, which is the forecast that we are trying to improve the accuracy of the forecast using the historical data coming from the station. And we do this for every individual location. So we are trying to build mechanisms that automatically improve themselves and provide a hyper-local forecast. So yeah, I don't want to advertise my project, but the point here is that by putting the resources there, we kind of prioritized for weather enthusiasts, and we disappointed the crypto degens in many ways. because there was not, especially at the beginning of the project, there was not a lot of crypto stuff happening in our project. And this gave us the luxury and the advantage that our community initially and still today, it was very much focused on the weather stuff. And we got feedback for how to improve the app, how to improve the hardware, how to improve the instructions that we're giving to people, like where were the mistakes and so on. And that was super important for us at the beginning of the project, and it still is. But there's a downside to this. Our community is smaller, so because we missed the huge growth that we would have had if we were using the typical crypto techniques to acquire users. And so I think going back to your question, you can design this and influence this in many ways. So it's up to you to be confident and specific on what you want to achieve.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. I think we are run out of the time. Thanks everybody for joining today's Twitter space. We have great panelists sharing their experience, their insight about the about this DePIN sector. I think one key takeaway is that collaboration and joint innovation is a key to ensure the long-term success of your new DePIN projects. Eventually, when we work together to make the infrastructure more mature, to make the application can address a real-world problem, we will eventually realize the ultimate vision of DePIN for everyone. Thanks, everybody.